What's going on everyone? For today's video is going to be another Apex Legends video. Today's title is how to aim in Apex Legends. I decided to make this because I know there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with this aspect of the game. Some beginner players, intermediate, even advanced players have to get reminded sometimes about these things. So I wanted to help out as much as possible. But before I begin, I do make a lot of Apex Legends content. So if you do enjoy this video, I would greatly appreciate you subscribe, hit that notification bell. It does help me out a lot. And let's get right into the video. Okay, so some of this is going to repeat from my other previous videos, but it's something that I do stand by. It's something that is essential, and I always work towards every single time I play the game. So hopefully you guys understand. But the first one is avoiding pegging. So this is pretty much hitting your thumbsticks at the edges of the controller. You want to be avoiding hitting your thumbsticks at the edges of the controller. The only reason you should be doing this is for only like 90 degrees to 180 degree movements and, you know, flick shots. So what's a 90 degree to 180 degree movement? Well, let's say you're getting shot in the back. That's a whole 180 degree movement and you have to turn around super quickly. So that's the only reason you should be doing that. Or like a flick shot with a wingman, for example, where you just, you know, aiming at a target and all of a sudden you have to shoot your wingman and you have to do a flick shot, you know what I mean? So that's the only reason you should be pegging. The reason though that you don't want to be doing this, and the whole idea behind this, is if you keep your thumbsticks in the edges of the controller, you'll be able to have more control of where you're aiming at. And you know, that way it doesn't throw your reticle off, it doesn't throw anything off. You know, you're able to be as accurate as possible. So the second one I have written down here is using both thumbsticks to aim. Your left thumbstick is for general movement, and your right thumbstick is to look around. This helps so much when strafing and, you know, trying to avoid being stationary. That's the whole idea here. So it helps out when strafing. What I mean by this is, you know, close range to medium range, it's okay to aim with both thumbsticks. I usually do it normally, you know, when I'm in those types of fights. The only reason you shouldn't be using both thumbsticks, there are a few exceptions. So the wingman, for example, where it's like a weapon that is super accurate, that weapon, I've found out that if you strafe too much, you're going to miss your shots, medium range to long range. So you have to be careful when you use both thumbsticks there. I would say you're going to have to sacrifice your left thumbstick and just use your right thumbstick a little bit more with the wingman, because, you know, you want to be as accurate as possible. And then another exception is fully automatic weapons at long range. Let's say you have an R301 and you're trying to spray that thing at a very long range. You're going to have to sacrifice your left thumbstick in order to do that, because you don't want to remain as accurate as possible. The whole idea behind this is subconsciously you're trying to strafe and at the same time aim at the same time. Hopefully this will help out a lot of people, because strafing and aiming have a lot to do with it. If you remain stationary, for example, you're going to probably die, you know, majority of the times, especially like in Predator lobbies and Diamond lobbies. You don't want to remain stationary, especially in a movement game like Apex Legends. Okay, so we have pre-aiming. Pre-aiming is looking at the direction where you think a player is going to be at. Examples of this is you think you see a person behind a building, so you start pre-aiming at a doorway, or you start pre-aiming at the right side of that building, you know. So that's what pre-aiming is. Pre-aiming is something that makes your life, or aiming, much more easier. You know, you're already aiming at that direction, so all you have to do is wait for that player to get in front of you, and you just press the right trigger, and you know, it's super easy to do, but it takes practice, of course. You can practice pre-aiming by pre-aiming to the right of a rock, or imagining that a player is behind a certain object and you just start pre-aiming there. So that's how I practiced it, and it's helped me out a lot. Pre-firing. So pre-firing is firing before you see your target. Usually I pre-fire when you are trying to, you know, damage the target before you go in for the final kill, or you start pre-firing because the target is like less than 60 HP. So you start shooting, like for example, pre-firing helps out with weapons that don't have a turbocharger, like let's say the Havoc or the Devotion. I start pre-firing those things because it does take some time to load up, and I don't want to be stuck in that animation where it's taking forever for the weapon to shoot a player. So that's why I start pre-firing majority of the times, but I do pre-fire my R99 once in a while for the same reason that I just mentioned, trying to damage the target before I go in for the kill, or I know that the target is like less than 60 HP, so I'm about to kill him. Alright, so crosshair placement and reticle placement. Apex Legends has both crosshairs and a small white reticle right at the center of the crosshairs. You want to focus on the reticle and practice having full control of that reticle. I'm not saying forget about the crosshairs. Yeah, the crosshairs are helpful as well, but if you focus on that reticle between those crosshairs, like, you're going to have full control, and that's what you want to be focusing on that reticle, that dot, whenever you're not aiming down the sight. If you focus on the reticle placement, your crosshair placement should follow. Same goes when ADSing. Focus on that reticle placement, whether it's a 301 or a 99. There's always a dot in the middle of the screen. You want to be focusing on that dot and trying to place that dot on the player at all times. That's what I focus on, and it's helped my game out a ton. The overall goal is for you to be able to track people. You can practice reticle placement by tracing the outlines of objects, like a rock, for example. You could trace the outline of it, and try to practice having full control of that reticle. Sometimes you might need to do micro corrections, which is something that I learned from Halo. Pretty much what this is moving your reticle from player's body to the head, or sometimes moving your reticle, making that small correction, hence micro correction, making that small correction of moving your reticle from the left to the right side because the player's body or head is right there. So it's just making that small little adjustment. Pretty much that's what it means. Okay, so this one's super important, and all aiming videos talk about this, but sensitivity. Understand the pros and cons of having both a high sense and a low sense. So high sense pros: in close range you can follow targets much easier, but the cons of having a high sense is medium range to long range. It's much more difficult to control recoil or spraying with a fully automatic weapon. Low sense pros: medium range and long range, it's easier to control recoil, therefore hitting your shots. And then the cons of having a low sense is that close range, it's much harder for you to follow targets. So you have to find, and I suggest, this is my advice, try to find a balance between both of them, and kind of figure that out for yourself. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to grind a high sense, but it usually takes much longer to learn, and that's from my experience. So I recommend finding a balance between like a high sense and a low sense, like I mentioned. So again, there is no such thing as the best sensitivity. It all comes down to your personal preference and how much you want to practice with that sense. I change my sense so many times. There's times where I change it from 4.4 to 4.3, messing around with it until eventually I say, okay, this is the sense that I want to grind. Muscle memory here is super important in sensitivity. The more you practice your sense, the more control you will have over your sensitivity. For anyone interested, I do play at a 4.4 with all my scope sensitivities like at default. So I know players like Snipe Down, they play like at a 4.3, and then they have like their scope sensitivities changed like 3.3, 5.5, something, I don't know. But I never found an issue with the scope sensitivities at default. I've always got used to that before, since it was never an option at the beginning. I've just gotten used to it over time. It's, again, personal preference, and I'm not here to tell you 4.4 is the best sensitivity in the world. I'm just saying, that's what I play at. Everyone plays differently. I used to play like at a 5.5, so essentially this is personal preference, and it's going to come down to you. So this is something important. It's called controller layout. You want to try to play a controller layout where you always have both thumbs on the thumbsticks. Something like bumper jumper or ninja, where you can still move both thumbsticks and jump/crouch. You know what I mean? So that being said, there's also controllers that you can buy with paddles in the back. That also, if you don't want to switch your controller layout, you can do that too. This way you don't have to switch that controller layout and keep playing at default. Or you can do what I do, which is play claw grip. Pretty much this is another option if you don't want to switch your controller layout or buy a controller with paddles like a scuff controller. Then you can play claw grip, and pretty much what this is you use your index finger or your pointing finger to press A, B, X, and Y, and your middle finger is pretty much your right trigger and right bumper. So that's usually how it goes, and you're always keeping your thumbs on the thumbsticks. It's a weird way of holding the controller, but I personally love it. I think it's great, and I can't see any other way of playing it. I can't go back anymore. I love claw grips. Alright, so this one is super important, and this is controlling recoil. Every weapon in Apex Legends feels different and is unique. So every weapon has different recoil patterns. Best way to learn how to control recoil in Apex is to jump into training mode and learn the recoil patterns of the weapons you are trying to get better with. How do you do this? Well, I will explain that in a bit. But if you can control the weapon's recoil without attachments, and you want to think about it this way, okay? If you can control the weapon's recoil without attachments, the weapon will become much easier to control when you do get that barrel stabilizer and when you do get that stock. That is super important, okay? So think about it that way. That's why you want to jump into training mode, figure out those recoil patterns, and being able to control it without any attachments is essential. So there's something called recoil control, and then there's something called recoil compensation. How do you control recoil? That's the question. Well, the way I train myself to how to control recoil is I shot at a wall in training mode without controlling the recoil, okay? This way you can see the pattern of the weapon's recoil, and you'll figure out what you need to do with your right thumb. Now you implement vertical recoil and horizontal recoil. All you have to do with vertical recoil is hold down your right thumbstick, which is pretty easy. But horizontal recoil, it's a little bit harder to control. So whenever your recoil pattern goes to the left, you need to compensate for that and slightly move your right thumbstick to the right, and vice versa. So for example, like a flat line, if it moves, how it moves left, right, left, right, left, right, every single time it goes to the left, you're gonna have to move slightly to the right, and then every single time it moves to the right, you're gonna have to move slightly to the left. And that's why it's such a difficult weapon to control at medium range to long range. But yeah, this comes down to muscle memory. If you practice a ton and do a lot of repetition, you should essentially be able to control eventually the flat line and any other weapon that has horizontal recoil. I think they added horizontal recoil to the 99 now in season 3, so keep that in mind. It's something that is essential. It's something that I keep that at all times thinking about. So you'll see me doing this in a lot of videos, but pretty much what I do here is leading my shot. It's super important, especially medium range to long range when people are moving. You want to be leading your shots. There is bullet drop in Apex Legends, so keep that in mind. And you want to try to place your reticle slightly in front of the target. So this does vary from situation to situation because of bullet velocity or how far away you are from the target. But essentially, if the further away you are from the target, you're going to have to slightly move your cursor or your reticle a little bit slightly more to the left or wherever the player is moving. This really just comes down to muscle memory again, a lot of practice, and it's not going to happen overnight, man. So it will take time to learn, and the more muscle memory you build, the better you're going to get at it. Since you made it at the end of the video, I'm going to give you guys a few bonus tips. It's something that I like to do in these types of videos. The first one is try to make your first couple shots headshots. Even if they're moving, try to do that. It might cost you your life, but if you keep practicing, eventually you're going to be able to do it, and that's going to do massive amount of damage. So once you start hitting the headshots and you think you can't hit headshots anymore, just go for the body because you already did enough damage, and that's all you have to do. You just go in for the kill after that. But once you go for those headshots, those are key, man, because they have to heal up. They're going to be panicking, and it's something that I like doing all the time. So yeah, try to make your first couple shots headshots and then go for the body, especially if a player is standing still. That's an easy headshot. I usually go for headshots when they're standing still or when they're moving. I still try to go for them because they do so much damage. Sometimes if the player is moving too fast and is strafing too much, okay, then I'll just go for the body because it's much easier to do that. But if I can go for the headshot, preferably, I would do that. Muscle memory, I'm going to tell you guys the definition of this. So it's consolidating a specific motor task in memory through a ton of repetition. So the reason I'm telling you this is because I do talk about it in the video, and it's something that I always work on. It's something that, you know, practicing the game is muscle memory. You know, claw grip was muscle memory, switching your controller layout is muscle memory, all of that stuff, you know, riding a bike, swimming, all this stuff that, you know, you're not going to forget after you do it for a very long time. It's muscle memory. So keep practicing, a lot of repetition, and you guys will get there. Oh yeah, and something that I found out, this is another one, you might need to switch controllers after 6 months to 12 months of use, because depending on how much you use it, of course, but because after 6 months or 12 months of use, your right trigger might, or, you know, your buttons might fail you, or, you know, I had an issue with the controller where my thumbstick was moving to the left slightly and I wasn't even touching the thumbstick. So if that happens, that's another variable you have to be thinking about, and it's something you want to be avoiding. So might as well either replace that thumbstick if you know how, or just buy a brand new controller. And this is more of a personal tip, but I personally do not like playing with sweaty hands or like a dirty controller, because it just throws me off psychologically. So I make sure to clean my controllers and have clean, dry hands when I'm playing. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like, subscribe if you guys haven't, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.